This is Jeanette Keynes from Jewelry Arts Inc. This is part 3 of my video series on how to make tubing for bezels and for spacers. We're live.
We're live.
So as you may recall, making tubing, right? So now we're at the stage that we're really trying to get the seam together. And that's why we spent so much time before with the sanding, because it's really essential that we get them tight together, because we have to fuse them shut. We're not adding solder. So you see what I mean? Here we've got Susie's and we've got Lori's. And usually what I do when we're at the point to really get them together, because like we were saying, we'll pull it through the draw plate. And yes, you can pull it through the draw plate to get them together, but is there ever the exact right size hole to perfectly put them together? Not usually. So a lot of times I get them as close as possible, and then I stick something in there, a dowel, a rod of some kind, just a little bit smaller. Don't throw your tubing on the floor, that's contraindicated. Just with a little bit of room in there, so that then I can take a dowel and I can use that to press them together. Now, a couple things to remember. I do it holding in my hand. I don't want to take this and put it on the bench and you get a little marks in it, and by the time you're done, it looks like you did it with your feet, right? So don't do that. I use a dowel to do the burnishing. Can you use a burnisher? Absolutely. But again, I love a dowel. It doesn't slip as much. It doesn't leave those shiny marks, which sometimes for something like this, it's actually a little distracting to have the seam get very shiny. You're looking at it and you're like, wait, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Is this, what I mean? So I like a dowel. Do whatever makes you happy. Now, the other thing that I want you to really think about when you're doing this is when you're getting the seam together, you want to go down the tubing. The draw dog is right here, and that's where what I'll consider the top of the tubing. That's where it's going to get pulled. So in other words, you don't want to get it really tight right here and then push up, because what is going to happen is they're going to spread apart. It's the same thing with when we're doing our fusing. In a perfect world, every molecule of this is going to touch beautifully, and we're going to fuse it together. In the real world, sometimes we get this nice and tight here, tack it, and then pull it through a draw plate. But what you can't do is tack it down here and then pull it through the draw plate to get it together. You know what I mean? The force is traveling like this, and that will not work. So if nothing else, get this right here touching nicely so we can tack it. It's just like I've said many times when we're fusing the beads, there's a difference between the fantasy world, we'll do it in one shot and everything's perfect and whatever, and the real world, which is guess what? It's perfectly fine, to do something in a couple rounds. There's no shame in that, especially when you have a long seam like this, okay? Mm-hmm. So what I do, I've taken this, I rub it down here like this, and I feel pretty good about how much they're together, how well they're touching. One thing that you're really going to want to do, though, I take it and I hold it up to a light source, and you're going to be looking through the tube, because if you look from here, right, everything looks fucking great. You know what I mean? And then if you look at it, I have to take this, I have to hold it up to a light source and look through the tube. And then you'll see what's really up. But this actually looks pretty good. You know what I mean? I think these are ready. To start fusing. We need to work on the bottom right here a bit more. So let me show you. Is that the right one?
I think
wrong one. Okay, so I'm gonna hold this like this. You see how the one side, the other side, and working my way down, because this is touching pretty well. Sorry, I'm moving around so much. It's like the Blair Witch tubing. Sorry, everybody. Everyone's nauseous at home now, oh, hold it still. You're killing me. But you see what I mean? It's here and here, here and here. That's how you get them really nice and tight together. Always working toward the bottom of the tube. The bottom of the tube being at the other end of the draw dog, okay? So we're gonna fool around with these a little bit more. We'll check them. If they look really good, I probably might just anneal them one more time so that they don't relax in the kiln, and then we'll plug in the kiln and get them going. Now, if you don't have a kiln and you want to fuse this like on your block or whatever, you certainly can. But if you have a nice little beehive kiln, the added heat is definitely extremely helpful when you have a relatively large object like this. So if at all possible, use the kiln. If not, just know you're going to need like to be extra robusto. Okay? So look at our beautiful tubing. Both Lori and Susie. So hold on one second. Lexi Lou, so take a look at that. Juicy, delicious tubing. They're both touching really nicely. But the truth is, like, do I know they're touching nicely? Like, we've looked at them, they look good. But just know that if we put them in the kiln and we get them hot and the seam is not touching super well, we're gonna leave alone any spot that doesn't look super nice. Do you know what I'm saying? Because sometimes you just, you know, you look, you check, you look, you check, but just know that's the final check, because when that gets super hot, the seam is gonna glow, just like when you're fusing a bezel, you know, which I'm sure you've all done before, but okay. So I'm gonna take one of these babies, whichever is one on the left, I don't even know whose that is, but it doesn't matter. We're gonna pop it in the kiln, like so. I'm gonna use a 0 tip, and basically it's just one giant bezel, like same procedure. We're gonna get it hot, I'm gonna take the flame, I'm gonna go circle, circle, circle until the seam really starts to glow. You notice I've turned off the overhead light. I'll be using the lid to cast a shadow, because basically the darker it is, the better you can see. Okay, like so. And you notice I'm being a little aggressive with the heating because this is big. Like, you know what I mean? We gotta get some shit happening here. You know, in other words, I can't be like, you know what I mean, doing this and I'm gonna get in here. So you see how when everything gets really nice and hot, the seam starts to glow all beautifully, like so. Now what I'm looking for is actually the best spot, which I think is probably right down here. You know, the tightest spot, in other words. Because you see how you get a little, you know, a little shine happening. And honestly, that seam has a little more space than I would truly like. I'm gonna go down here and see what these guys look like. Do you see what I'm saying? Like how that's just like a little wider than I would really like to see. So what I'm gonna do with this one, I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna let it cool, and we're just gonna go over it a little bit more and get a little tighter. So it's not like it's terrible, no good, but you know, with fusing, if they're not touching, you know what I mean? It'll just melt open. It won't fuse shut. Let's pop the other one in there. Okay, you see how you get it nice and hot, and as it gets hotter, the seam starts to glow brightly. Now you notice how the seam looks a little smaller than the other one. This one looks a little tighter. So I think we're going to be able to get this going. See that? It flows a little bit, and then the seam doesn't glow there anymore. So this one's a little tighter. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to work our way. Where do you think you're going? Of course, you see how stubborn I am because I'm like, fine. You asshole. Okay, we're gonna pause and I'm gonna get a little piece of tile for it to rest against and stop being a little asshole. Okay. You better knock that off. I might have to move the tile to the other side, but that's just like a little piece of tile. Just has to be something, you know, non-flammable. Zoom. Yes. And we were just talking about before, this is going to be made into little spacers. So this tubing was a little thinner, which is probably why this one was a little easier to get tight together. And the other one, which is the heavier one, you know what I mean? We'll give it one more round. So it's not a big deal, but that's more than likely why we did the same thing to both of them. And yet one's a little bit tighter than the other. So you see how you get it all beautiful and hot. And then you see that little glow, that little shimmer? That is fusing. Ooh. Remember how I said it's tile, but it has like the little bit of, the backing on there. But we're going to pretend all of you at home are not seeing that. Because I would never put it in there without burning that off first, because that would just be crazy. And what I'll do, I'll work down to here, and then I'm going to flip it around because the end that's hanging out is obviously not really getting heated by the kiln that much, and you want everything nice and hot. And you also notice the section that's laying next to the tile is not wanting to get that hot, which is why I don't like to use the tile. But what I'm going to do is try to just touch it in one spot. I'm going to try that. Okay, so I'm going to stop and flip it around. Let's do a little bit more, and then we'll pause and we'll pickle, and we'll go over the seam again to get any little bits that are, fighting our will. Another thing too, once I get it tacked up toward the top, sometimes I'll just pickle it, and then we'll pull it through the draw plate like one hole, just to, to get any last little bits together nice and tight. That's another good way of, if you have a couple little spots that are maybe not so great, that you can get them to touch together nicely. Because what you will notice at the very end, that very end part does not want to come together. I mean, it will fight you tooth and nail 100%. And if we were making a little tiny, not, like a 1 inch long thing, we would have been done. This is just, it's big, it takes a lot of heat, and we've got a lot of seam to cover. Okay, so I think this area down here is a little more spacious, if you will. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm just going to stop. We're going to throw both of these in the pickle. We're going to do a little zhuzh with a dowel, maybe pull it through a hole in the draw plate, and then back into the kiln to fire it up.